Welcome to Novelist Spotlight, the podcast where published fiction writers are interviewed to gather their insights and writing lessons so we can use them to make ourselves better and more effective writers. There are just 3 things I ask of you, if appropriate to you and your experience. Please subscribe, please click on the like button, and please share this program link with any family members, friends, or colleagues who might be interested or benefit from the content. Now, on with our program.
In the spotlight is Sharon Short. She is the author of the novel 1 Square Inch of Alaska, but she also writes under the name Jess Montgomery, and that is a series, a historical mystery series set in the 1920s, and her protagonist is a sheriff named Lily Ross. So we have Sharon Short and Jess Montgomery with us technically. Sharon, welcome to the program.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And, you've done something that a lot of authors do for particular reasons, and that is that you come up with a couple different names to operate under. So explain how this came into being. Why did Sharon Short kind of bifurcate and decide I'm also going to be writing under the name Jess Montgomery?
Well, as you mentioned, as Sharon Short, I have had a novel published called My 1 Square Inch of Alaska. And prior to that, I had 2 mystery series, one humorous, one back in the 90s that was a sort of technical PI series. And those, 10 books were I shouldn't say very, but they were different in tone and certainly setting, style, theme from what I started writing under what became the pen name Jess Montgomery. So the Kinship Historical Mystery Series are, obviously historical. They're in third person. Most of my other work was in first person, and most of my other work was contemporary or closer history. The Alaska book is set in the 50s. So, and I'd evolved quite a bit as a writer. So it just, those were all the reasons. And I was actually my agent who suggested it for the reasons I just gave. And she's a fabulous agent. And when she tells me to do something, I say, yes.
Good idea. As long as you're succeeding, and you appear to be. Now, you've written in third person, you've written in first person. Some people like one or the other. Do you have a preference between the two? And if so, why?
I think first person is falsely given the description of being easier to write. And I don't think it is if you're doing it correctly, because unless you're writing a memoir or a personal essay, even though you're writing, I did this or I felt that, it's not really you. It's this character you've created who's saying this. So I find it just as challenging as third person. And I think the way to choose which point of view to work with depends on what the story is. I always tell other writers, serve the story, which sounds very woo-woo, and also not very concrete, but every tip actually boils down to that. So if the story is going to be better served by being in first person versus third person, then, or vice versa, then that's the way you should go.
So as Jess Montgomery, you write in first or third person? In
third person. And there are a couple of reasons for that. So the novels are set in 1920s Appalachian area of Ohio. The protagonist, as you said, is Lily Ross, who's a sheriff inspired by Ohio's true first female sheriff in 1925. But the novels are narrated by her in third person and by another member from the community in third person. So if you think about the word kinship, it's not just a place that I've kind of made up. It's the concept of kinship, community, working together. And so it worked better to have it in third person because of the dual narration. But also the first novel in the series, which is called The Widows, follows Lily as she discovers right at the beginning of the book, so this is not a spoiler, that her husband, the sheriff, has been killed in the line of duty. And she not only is his wife, but she's worked for him as the jail matron and keeping track of records and so forth and so on. And so a county commissioner comes to her and says, we want you to fill in. And she takes this opportunity to do so, partly because, mostly actually at the beginning of that book, because she wants to find out who killed her husband. Well, I did try to write it in first person because I'd written 7 of my previous novels in first person. And I wrote a personal essay column for 10 years for the Dayton Daily News. So I was used to first person. And I realized if I was being true to how that character would feel, because like me, she's very much in love with her husband, then my whole narration would be, oh my God, oh no, I'm so upset. I'm so sad. I'm so angry. And I thought, okay, that's not going to work. So I wanted that remove of third person. But at the same time, I wanted it to feel immediate. So I ended up doing third person present tense.
So, Jess Montgomery, I've got a couple of different questions going on in my mind. First of all, how many books have you written in total between Sharon Short, Jess Montgomery, and any other pseudonym you may have used?
Those are my only pseudonyms that I have. Well, Sharon Short's my actual name, so I only have the one pseudonym, Jess Montgomery. So let's see. I have The Echoes is the 4th book in the Kinship series coming out soon, and so 4 as Jess, and then 10 novels as Sharon, and then a collection of essays as Sharon. So I guess that's 15.
Now, you talked to your agent, or your agent talked to you about using a pseudonym. Talk about the development of the name Jess Montgomery, because there's so many places, there's so many different names you could have come up with. And Jess, my understanding, which could be taken as male or female, is female, obviously, because, not obviously. Lily Ross is obviously female, but Jess Montgomery could have been male or female. Mm-hmm. My understanding is you were not trying to sound androgynous to appeal to all readers. It's just a name you came up with. But there's a story behind that. How did that come about?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Montgomery was easy because I live in Montgomery County. I'm writing about a county sheriff. Her county is different than my county, but that seemed an obvious connection. And more deeply than that, the Montgomery County Arts Council had given me 2 different grants as an artist. And so that was my homage to that council. And I grew up in Montgomery County and I live in Montgomery County. Well, then I needed a first name. I realized I needed it to be simple, maybe 1 syllable. And I wanted to honestly read a little younger than Sharon. So I went on the Social Security baby names database, which is a great resource, by the way, for finding character names that are appropriate to whatever era you're writing in. And I found 3 names that fit kind of the age I was going for in my imagination, mid to late 30s. And one was Jess and one was Jen, and I don't remember the third one, but I texted my agent, my 2 daughters and 2 friends, so I wouldn't have a tie. Had 5 votes, and asked them to vote. And 3 people said Jess and 2 people said Jen, and that's why I don't remember the third one. So that's how I became Jess Montgomery. It was very pragmatic, but I had absolutely zero idea that anybody would think that I was trying to be androgynous or trying to write under a male name. But I've been asked that question a lot. And I remember the first time I was asked, are you trying to be, ambiguous or trying to have a male name? I was just stunned by the question because to me, Jess is a female name.
Yeah, it can be. But I have a good friend who's male, who's Jess. His name is Jess. And
oh, cool.
Yeah, so it definitely popped into my mind. And it kind of, I've seen that before where people clearly are trying to either pass themselves off, a male trying to pass themselves off as a female by using initials. Because they're writing, say, romance or something that's much more of a female genre than a male genre. So the story behind the actual decision for pseudonym, your agent told you it was a good idea because you started this new series. Did you immediately start this series? Did you know it was going to be series number 1? And number 2, was it right off the bat that when your agent learned what you were working on, said, well, we really need to make this distinctive by from your other work by giving it its own name or the author a different name.
Yeah. So just a quick note on the previous question. I just want to make a note that there's absolutely nothing wrong with going for an androgynous or different gendered name than what you personally identify with. It just wasn't something that ever crossed my mind. So it was after I had finished the book and it was time to shop it around that my agent suggested this. And in terms of it being a series, no, I thought The Widows was a standalone. I thought I had written a book that stood on its own, which it does. Actually, all of the books can be read in pretty much, in any order as standalones or in order if you prefer, however you like to approach that as a reader. But my agent sold The Widows and one other historical book. That was the, the entirety of the description to my publisher, Minotaur Books. And my wonderful editor started chatting with me about what was I going to write, next, because the only requirement was that it would be an historical mystery, have some social justice themes, which The Widows does. And I was fine with that. That's exactly what I wanted to write. So I had a couple ideas that she thought were fine. But she said, have you thought about writing a series? And my initial reaction was, well, no, because I had done that twice before. And that my previously book before The Widows was a standalone. So I was kind of in that mindset. But I said I would think about it. And I came up with the notion of, well, The Widows is set in the 20s. What if, and I loved the decade books from Time Life. So I said, what if we did decade by decade? The next book could be set in the 30s. And, we can look at themes of the Great Depression, the 40s, obviously themes from World War II, and so forth and so on. And she said, how long are you planning to write for us? And I said, well, as long as y'all have me, obviously. And she said, well, but I really want you to write historical. And if you progress each book decade by decade, pretty soon you'll have a contemporary, and then you'll be writing science fiction because it'll be set in the future.
Yeah, you'll have to go to the future. and Lily will have a laser gun instead of a hard
Lily's
metal.
Child will be on Mars with a laser gun. Yeah. So I thought that was very funny. And it still makes me chuckle. And I saw her point. So what we agreed was that we would progress each book by a year and a half or so. So that's what we've done. And it's worked out really well. There's a lot to mine from the 1920s, which is where I still am with this series.
I can imagine. Now, so your agent encouraged you to write historical fiction. Is that, did she just feel like, hey, that's your wheelhouse, stick with it?
Oh, actually, no, she did not encourage me. I mean, she didn't discourage me either. It was just, I found the agent I'm been working with for quite a while now with my 1 square inch of Alaska. I was not agent. I had finished a relationship with an agent and was looking for a new one. And I wrote my 1 square inch of Alaska in its entirety. It's the book of my heart, so are the Jess novels, but my 1 square inch of Alaska holds a very special place in my heart. And I was going to finish that book and write it no matter, if it ever got published or not. I was going to write that book. And once I did, I thought, well, I'd like people to read it. So I started searching for a new agent and found my current agent with my 1 square inch of Alaska. And after that came out, I played with a couple different ideas and then came up with what would become The Widows. And she liked the idea, but she didn't say, I want you to write historical mystery.
Well, your titles are forceful 2-word names. There's the Echoes, mm-hmm. The Widows. What's the third one I'm leaving out here?
The Stills.
The Stills.
The third one. The second one's The Hollows.
The Hollows. Okay, so will you continue to? Is that kind of a theme that you'll carry forward, or is that something that you may change along the way?
Who knows? I've seen. I think titles kind of. I don't want to say they go through phases, but they kind of do. I've seen long-running series switch back and forth between phrases versus 2-word titles. But at this point in time, that's part of the stamp of Jess Montgomery's kinship series, is that it's the something that relates to the theme and the area that I'm writing about.
So describe Lily Ross for us. She's your character in the Jess Montgomery books. Who is she? What is her psychological makeup? I mean, obviously she went looking for her husband's killer.
Mm-hmm.
Flesh her out more completely than that. Who is Lily Ross?
Who is Lily Ross? So she's a woman of her era. So, it's the mid to late 1920s. She's, late. She herself is in her late 20s. I think she turns 30 in this last book. So, she was born like in the 1890s. So she's a product of her time to a degree, but she's also very aware that she doesn't quite fit the mold of what was expected of women from that era. She likes to hunt. She likes to fish. She chafes at, having to go to the women's club and talk about books or talk about embroidery patterns or whatever. She's fine that other women find those things interesting, but she doesn't really fit her particular era's expectations very well. So it's not so much that she's a rebel, because she's also willing to use those expectations to her advantage. She's just aware she doesn't quite fit. She's very passionate about justice and the rule of law. The rule of law is paramount in her mind. If you don't like the laws of the land, there's a process in place to properly change them. So she's very much that way. So it's kind of an interesting mix, because she's a little bit of a, rebel and steps outside the box for her own role, but at the same time, very much about the rule of law. She's got a kind of, because of her past, she has a bit of distrust of community. The community betrayed her when she was or people in the community betrayed her when she was in her teens, very formative years. She also saw some real awful hate crimes against people of German descent or immigrants from Germany during the First War and leading up to the First War, World War. So she's seen the ugly side of community and has some concerns about that. But at the same time, and this is kind of her character arc throughout the series, recognizes the need for community to help individuals, and for individuals to be aware of the social contract we all have. We live in a society, whether we like it or not, and our actions affect one another, whether we like it or not. We have to be mindful of that in whatever we do. So for her, that tension of how do you find the balance between individual freedom and, community demands is like kind of the core of what she subconsciously struggles with day to day, and what she sees as a sheriff and enforcing the law. So she's definitely fearless. She's tough. Not always particularly tactful. She might have gotten that from me. But at the same time, like I said, willing to use,
Deadly force.
Yeah, willing to use deadly. Well, she's never used deadly force. She's never, not to give away too much, but I have yet to have her actually have to kill somebody in the line of duty.
What caliber weapon does she carry? I assume it's a revolver, since automatics I don't think we're around yet.
Right. I'm so glad you forewarned me that you would ask this question, because I do not, I've shot guns, but I'm not a person who knows a ton about guns. So at the beginning of The Widows, she has a little Derringer that her husband gave her. And then she inherits, after he passes away, she uses his Colt 45 revolver. And
that's a big gun.
Yeah.
It's a big caliber.
Yeah, that was sort of the gun from my research, the gun that would have been used by law enforcement back then. So she uses that. Of course, she has shotguns because, she's a hunter. So she's more comfortable with hunting weaponry. So yeah, that's what she
I
uses.
would kind of assume that she also runs into some sexism. I don't think there were a lot of female law enforcement officers at the time. Do you find that? Did she have to establish herself just in terms of building credibility with some of the men who thought that's not a woman's job?
Oh, goodness, yes. Yes. Yeah. In real life, like I said, she's inspired by Maud Collins, who was Ohio's first female sheriff in 1925. When her husband died in the line of duty, there was absolutely no mystery about why her husband died. He was actually trying to serve a warrant for a traffic ticket and got shot by the person he was serving the warrant to. But the next female sheriff in the state of Ohio was in 1976. That's 51 years later. The next female sheriff after that was the year 2000. And then in 2020, we have two. So there are 88 counties in the state of Ohio. And in the span of 100 years, we've had 5 female sheriffs. Now, we've
Wow.
had deputy sheriffs. Certainly, we've had female police chiefs. We've had plenty of female officers. And I don't think Ohio is unique in having so few female sheriffs. So, yeah, it would have been incredibly, it's interesting because I spent time over in that part of Ohio, ended up talking to a much older woman in her 80s whose, was it her parents? Maybe her parents were friends with Maud and Maud's husband. And she said, yes, it was unusual, but it's such a rural area, and the county's deputy sheriffs, who were all men, of course, didn't want the job. For one thing, they'd just seen the sheriff get killed serving a traffic ticket, essentially. And, they had other jobs, and they knew that Maud knew the law, and people liked Maud and her husband Fletcher very much. And also, they lived in the sheriff's house, and, if Maud wasn't going to be sheriff, they were going to have to kick her out. And so where was she going to go? This widow with, in real life, like 4 or 5 kids. So it was sort of this pragmatic kindness that let her take the job and serve out her husband's term. But in real life, Maud liked the job, apparently, because she ran for re-election in 1926 and won by a landslide, which I find really stunning, but she did. So it's an interesting mix because, yeah, there still is. I think it's still very unusual for a woman to be in law enforcement or a sheriff. Not as unusual as it was, but
Yeah. Well,
honestly, I have a daughter who serves in the military, and it's fascinating to me the reactions I get about that in the year 2022.
right. Yeah. It lingers on. Now, let's. I want to ask you about genre writing. On the one hand, well, do you think that genre writing, in terms of just being financially successful and building up a readership and a readership that follows you along, do you think genre writing has kind of an advantage in terms of really just kind of building an audience and being able to make money as an author?
Making money as an author, that's a concept.
Novel concept.
I certainly have, so I should not at all complain, and I'm not complaining. But I say it that way because I don't think anybody should go into writing simply to make money. I think it's perfectly fine to go into writing and to expect that at some point, yes, your efforts should be rewarded in the financial way that, an accountant is rewarded or the person who cuts my lawn is rewarded. So I think it's perfectly fine to want to earn money. I certainly do, as a creator. But I don't think that should be the reason, because it's just too danged hard.
Yeah, you got to love what you're doing.
You gotta love what you're doing. And in terms of genre, honestly, I think every piece of writing falls in some genre or another. I consider literary to be a genre. Obviously sci-fi, mystery, romance, so forth and so on. And I say that because human beings love and need categories. That's how we find, what we want to watch, what we want to read, what we want to wear, what we want to eat. So everything falls into a genre. I do think there are some genres that are more popular than others, depending on, what's going on around us or readers' tastes. So I think romance, for example, is a very popular genre. Sci-fi and fantasy certainly are. Mystery definitely is. I think it's probably harder to get people to, perk up when if you say I write in the literary genre or I write, poetry, it's probably harder to get people's attention. But I always think that you should look at what is it that you love to read. And that's probably the genre you should be writing in.
Let me ask you about, let's just say your agent gets a deal with Netflix for a series or a movie on the silver screen. What Hollywood actress, a little thought experiment here, what Hollywood actress would be ideal in your mind to play Lily Ross?
Reese Witherspoon.
Oh.
I think she's...
Tell me why. Other than she's an outstanding actress.
She's an outstanding actress, but her range, her ability to... So she played June Carter Cash in Walk the Line, the biopic about Johnny
movie.
Cash. Oh, I love that movie. That is like one of my very favorite movies. And she carried off that role in a way that was not at all cliched. It was very believable. And so I think she could carry off, obviously, I think, like Reese would need to hear me say that. Obviously, she could carry off a Southern, Appalachian woman in a way that's believable and not a stereotype. So I think she would be fantastic. If I were to cast Marvina, I'm spacing on the actress's name, but there's a Netflix series that I love called Ozark. And now I'm spacing on the
Are you talking about Ruth? Are you talking
Ruth,
about...
Yeah.
Ruth. Okay.
The actress who plays Ruth, wouldn't she make a great Marvina? Ooh, yes.
There you go. She's getting a
so
lot of work
good
these days too. So you would pay a pretty penny for her. Or they would pay a pretty penny for her because she's getting a lot of work and doing really well.
For the music, I would love Roseanne Cash to be involved with the music of any series or film that might be made from Kinship. Well, but this is all fantasy. It's fun though.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You put the word out there, put the thought out there. Now, are you continuing to write under your own name, Sharon Short? Or are you Jess Montgomery all the way for now?
Well, I write as Sharon Short, a column for Writer's Digest called Level Up Your Writing Life. So I write under my actual name for Writer's Digest, which is fun. And I have a side project I'm playing with that I think would better fit the Sharon Short brand, if you will. We'll see. We'll see what comes of it.
And I do want to talk to you about your column in Writer's Digest. Talk a little bit about your writing advice. I mean, I'm sure it's wide ranging, but if you were to kind of bullet point some of the pieces of writing advice that you would impart to the novice writer or somebody who has gotten started, maybe not a novice, but is struggling to get to earn an agent and earn a publishing house contract. Mm-hmm. What's some of the advice you would give to those writers out there?
So specifically for getting an agent and then breaking into publishing, traditional publishing?
Sure.
Okay. So
let's go with that.
Yeah. So I think focus on getting the agent. If you want to break into traditional publishing, such as, with Macmillan or Minotaur Books or HarperCollins or any of the big five, or even smaller traditional publishing houses, you need an agent. You just really do. For one thing, your work isn't going to be, the chances of your work being considered without an agent at a traditional publishing house is smaller than the chance you're going to win a lottery if you buy 5 tickets a day for every day. It's just so small.
It's just one of the screens that you have to get through.
You have to
Otherwise
get through.
it won't. Yeah.
They won't even, you won't even be, it won't matter how beautifully you've written a novel or how much of a stunning bestseller it could be. So you need the agent just for access, but you need the agent, perhaps more importantly, just that's your ally. That's the person that can negotiate for you the right kind of contract. And you don't want to do that yourself because you don't, if you wanted to be an agent, you would go be an agent. That's a skill in and of itself, first of all. And secondly, you don't want to be negotiating a business deal with the person that's then going to turn around and be your editor and work with you as an artist. That's mixing two different thought processes in your career. And the other part of that is, if you're frustrated or you have goals, maybe you're not frustrated, but you have like, oh, I want that Netflix deal. Well, you need somebody to be able to say that to, that you can trust, that can either say, not quite there yet, or can say, all right, let's see what we can do. Let's go for it. Let's see what our next step would be. So the best way to find an agent is to look at the resources that list agents. There's the Association of Author Representatives. I may not be getting the title exactly right, but if your listeners Google that, they'll find the association. And so you want to find agencies that are a member of that because they've been vetted in the sense that they make their money selling books. They don't make their money charging you to give you feedback. And there are services like that, which are perfectly fine, but that's not what an agent should do. So you want to make sure you find good professional agencies. And one tip for somebody starting out is don't go for the top agent in the agency. Look to see who's the assistant agent. Look on their website where it says, Joe Smith is, assistant agent, just joined this agency 3 months ago and is looking for futuristic novels about sheriffs on Mars or whatever. And hey, wait, you've written that. So then you not only have found, somebody who's interested in what you're writing, but you're also, frankly, you found somebody who's hungry. The agents who have the bestsellers don't need another author or 5. The agents who are just starting out, but are in an agency where there are bigger agents who can give them advice, that's who you want to go to. Because, let's say you're the first client for this, Joe Smith, but Joe Smith works for a big agency where there's some powerful names. Well, they're not going to let Joe Smith mess up, right? Because their agency name is on the line. And Joe Smith's not going to want to mess up because this is their first time trying to get a deal. So they're going to work with the more experienced agents at a big agency. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. Now tell me about any rituals you observe in your writing. You're obviously a very consistent writer. I don't know if it's every day, but you write a lot. Are there any rituals that you observe or any particular practices that really make it work for you?
I do write a lot. I write every day except Sunday. I try to write right after I've exercised on Monday through Thursday. I take off Friday and Saturday and Sunday from that. I have a little candle that I light, and the candle holder is this little turtle that my daughter gave me from, I don't know, she was like 8 or something, and she found this and bought it for me for Mother's Day or maybe my birthday. But I love it because it makes me think of her. And I also like the idea of the little turtle representing slow and steady progress, like the old story. And then
a metaphor sitting right on your desk.
Exactly. And then I look at the candle and another metaphor, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, like the old, Sunday school hymn. And it gives me something to focus on if I start, because my attention easily starts to wander more and more these days, I find. So it gives me something to look at and refocus while I'm writing. I also try to, do kind of writing sprints, like, okay, all you're doing for 50 minutes is writing. That's what you're doing. You don't need to worry about the laundry or about what's going on in the world. And it's just 50 minutes. And so
50 or 15?
50, 50.
50. Okay. So,
Yeah, that's what works for
okay.
me. I
Nearly
mean,
an
for
hour.
other people, maybe 10 minutes works. You should go with whatever works for you. But that's what works for me. And sometimes I get so into it, I just keep going. I do like to listen to acoustic music. I cannot listen to music with lyrics, or I'll just sit there and listen to the lyrics and sing along. So I need to listen to like movie soundtracks or sort of white noise or nature type music as a way to kind of get in the zone to write. So those are some of my rituals.
So is that your system of, do you do the 50-minute sprint and then you take a break, and then is it a series of 50-minute sprints? And as you say, if you're in the channel, you'll continue to write. You won't just quit at 50 minutes if you're in the middle of something. But do you break it up that way? Is that restorative to be able to stop after a certain amount of time and then do something different for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour, and then go right back to it?
Yeah, I chose 50 minutes partly because it made me smile, the notion of the 50-minute hour with your therapist.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so that's part of it. Part of it is it's not as intimidating as an hour. And yeah, if I can take a 10-minute break, then, usually that involves I'm just going to stretch, I'm going to take a bio break, I'm going to drink some water, whatever. And 50 minutes isn't intimidating to me. And so to me, saying, oh, I'm going to write a 90,000 word novel and I'm going to write all day, every day till it's done, that's just too overwhelming. But if I can say, you're going to write 50 minutes, that's it. But, you can do that. Heck, you just swam for 50 minutes. You can write for 50 minutes. So that's one reason I chose that.
Mm-hmm.
And on my work days, not Saturday. Saturday, it's usually like maybe one or two of those sessions, but Monday through Friday, on a good day, I try to get in 4. So that's almost 4 hours of focused writing, and that's plenty.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The rest of the workday can be I'm taking care of marketing, or I'm catching up on email, or whatever.
Now, have you ever used a writing coach? I mean, you're a writing coach yourself, really, because of the writing you do for Writer's Digest. But have you, in your past, used a writing coach?
Yeah, I guess I kind of am in a roundabout way. I hadn't thought of that. I have, yes. I've used. Can I say her name? Is it okay?
Sure, why not?
Sure. I've used Tiffany Yates Martin.
Former guest on this program.
Yeah,
writing coach and author under the name Phoebe Fox. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. She's the person I have hired, and it was for the widows. I had gotten it so far, and then and so had my agent, giving me feedback, and we agreed I needed fresh eyes. And I'd gotten some feedback from trusted readers as well, but we realized I needed feedback from somebody who didn't know me at all and who wasn't a friend. Now, since then, Tiffany's become a friend because she's fabulous, and who wouldn't want to be friends with Tiffany? But yeah, it was like taking a master class working with her. And actually, that's how my agent kind of put it to me. She said, you never got an MFA. So look at it this way. This is a way to invest in yourself as a writer, whatever else comes of this. And she was absolutely right. I learned so much about point of view and deep point of view from Tiffany. And it's just what I needed, not only for the widows, but for the writing I've done since.
Yeah, I tell you, when Phoebe was on the program, she had said that she actually likes editing better than the writing, and there she is, a successful novelist, but she really loves the editing, the coaching and editing. So obviously you picked a winner there. Uh-huh. What age were you when you started writing? When did you know you were a writer or wanted to be a writer?
Oh, my answer is so obnoxious because I was like 5 or 6.
How did you know? I mean, what did you overhear? I remember I know an author who said he overheard Dylan Thomas on the radio reading from his stuff. and he just said, "That's for me." And
That's
he knew he
amazing.
wanted to do that with his life. But was it that obvious, or did you just feel the impulse?
I love that story about the author who, yeah, because I also love Dylan Thomas. That's a beautiful story. No, I grew up in a chaotic home and childhood, and my refuge was books and story. So I became a reader at a very young age. And I think just, when I wasn't reading, just sort of started spinning stories in my own head as a way to kind of get out of there mentally. And then, but I was very, very, very young. My first little book was about, like I said, I was like 6, and I made this little book about firefighters rescuing a cat from a tree. And I bound it in construction paper and put on the front. So I was already a mercenary. I put 1 cent up in the corner. And then on the inside front cover, I wrote published by Little Golden Books. So I had aspirations already of like, I will be part of the big 5. I didn't think of it that way, of course, because I was 6. But I sold it to my aunt, one of my many, many aunts. And she kept it in a box of like greeting cards. For years and years and years, and passed away before my first novel was published. And after my first novel was published, my
That's
uncle,
a shame.
yeah, he was sort of, actually, he and his second wife were cleaning out the house and found her box of Christmas cards and whatnot. And this little book gave it back to me. And I'd actually forgotten that I had done that. It was just this wonderful little affirmation of, yeah, that I really have always wanted to do this. And it kind of, as an adult, reminded me, she took you seriously. You may not specifically remember that more than in a foggy kind of way, but at some level that resonated in me. So I
Mm.
try to take kids seriously, when they share their aspirations or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. What are you working on now, Sharon?
Well, now I'm working on what might be a standalone as Jess. I'm not going to say much more than that because it's in its little infancy stages. So I'm having fun setting up the world and playing with that. It would be historical mystery once again. And then if The Echoes is coming out, the 4th book in the Kinship series at the end of March. So I'm excited to talk to people about that. So I'm working on some blog posts and things like that.
And how often does your column in Writer's Digest appear? How often do you write for them? Is it intermittent, or are you on a schedule?
It's every issue, so I'm lucky that it's in every issue, and they come out every other month.
Well,
So
terrific. Well, congratulations, Sharon and Jess, on the work that you've been able to accomplish. Again, our guest has been Sharon Short. She writes also under the name Jess Montgomery, and has a series where her protagonist is named Sheriff Lily Ross. She's packing a Colt 45, although doesn't have to use it a whole lot. She hasn't laid anybody in their grave yet. Obviously, she understands de-escalating a situation and talking people down, which is we need a lot more of that in the world these days, Sharon.
Yes,
So
we do.
you obviously there it is. I mean, there's so you're kind of a negotiator as well. Something to be learned from your books on that front for sure. Thank you for taking the time and coming on the program, Sharon, and we'll look forward to your next piece of work.
Thank you so much.